Edith, she's a environmental and the art teacher, science and art teacher, and she as she mentioned, she has a long life experience teaching children in alternative environments, and she's also a visual artist, and she's the editor of a website, Evolving Beauty. She's so kind to present us her work with a new book that she wrote, and that will be published in this year in the fall. And I think we're all excited to hear about it. Edith, please.
Thank you so much, Simona, and many thanks to you all for being here. I'll just get ahead and I'll share my screen, hopefully. Let's see here. Doesn't look like it worked quite yet. We want to go to the slideshow for sure. And I would just like to be in presentation mode. Can you all see it now?
No, you haven't shared your screen yet.
All right, let me go back. Sorry.
No worries.
Because I'm used to teaching young children and doing visual art, which is quite a quiet thing to be doing, I'm not accustomed to presenting in this sort of a format. So I'm really out of my element, but I'm trying here. We'll see what we can do.
I think if you go to slideshow at the top, yeah, and then play from start, that should work.
I guess
yes.
That's it.
Yes.
It looks all right here, but okay. All right. Well, I'll spare you a lengthy bio. Thank you, Simona, for a gracious recap. I do teach environmental science and the visual arts. I've been doing that for 30 years. And I've also been creating and attending learning gardens for most of that time in many varied venues, ranging from schools that included public, independent, and parochial settings. And I also taught at museums and environmental science centers. This will just give you a sense of where some of my slides come from. Mostly they're from permaculture-inspired gardens that I was designing and caring for in southern New Hampshire with the help of students and volunteers during the last 8 years of my active classroom teaching. Or some of them will be coming from slides from Beaverbrook Association, a beautiful nature center in our area. These are a few slides that will show you some of the visual art that I've been making during these decades as well. This is a recent project. I was the illustrator for the New Hampshire Farm to School Indigenous Calendar and its supporting materials. And this online publication was released in 2020. And I'll also mention that I've been uploading many of the activities that I developed during my years of teaching to my website, and this is an ongoing process. 5 of the activities that I wrote have been previously published in the Canadian online environmental education magazine, Green Teacher, and that's a very fine resource for teaching environmental science. Very progressive. Importantly, I found that when I found that my students enjoyed learning these different projects, and that's why I wanted to share them with other teachers. I think that they can be very useful. And so if you go to the website, it's evolvingbeauty.org. I already put it in the chat. You'll find numerous free downloadable activity pages that are related to gardening or the creatures and ecological processes that are characteristic of the temperate forests of the Northeast. And of course, these are adaptable to different ecosystems. You can just change the characters, and you can use many of the games that are in these, that are on that website, can be adapted for any place in the world. And you'll also find materials on some other topics that I care deeply about, such as organic gardening, farming, Laudato Si, deep history, and the universe story of Thomas Berry. So that's a little bit about what you'll find at that website. And this is the book that's coming up in fall of 2003, and that's it's a collection, mostly of the activities that are game related. And so what I'll be presenting here will be a lot of the art projects, but there's also a draft, a downloadable draft of the games on that website, and you're encouraged to just go ahead and download that. You don't have to wait. If you find anything that intrigues you, it's all free and it's just downloadable. And that takes us to a moment. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not used to doing this kind of presentation. Let's see, the book, I did want to say that the book has 172 pages, and so it is pretty extensive. And so now I'd like to just take a few moments for centering. I think I need this. And I'd like to also do a land and place acknowledgement. In the past tense, in the 20th century, I would never have imagined beginning a science teaching presentation in this way. It's almost like a little secular prayer. But at this point, I welcome this new custom, and whenever possible, I amplify it to make my land acknowledgement a little bit more expansive and provide a deep history perspective. So here it is, and I'd like you to imagine that how you might use a land acknowledgement such as this if you happen to be teaching some middle or upper elementary school students. So I'd like to invite you all to pause for a moment and to give yourselves a moment to rest and breathe deeply, to enjoy the oxygen coursing into your lungs, to exhale fully. To breathe in again and harvest from the vast surrounding universe those minute star-birthed atoms of oxygen that are so essential for our little but amazing lives on this planet. Let's remember that this planet itself and ourselves are all gifts from a 13.8 billion-year-old cosmos to which we all belong and in which we will always participate going forward. Allow your body, itself made out of stardust, to settle peacefully, to rest, to breathe out and breathe in. And since we're all on a particular piece of land at this particular time, let's acknowledge our gratitude to those who were here before us on this planet, human and otherwise. The little microorganisms, the plants, the animals, the fungi, etc., our relatives with whom we share common genetics and whose concerted actions have created this beautiful world into which we were born. Let's acknowledge especially our human ancestors from all around the world whose love and struggles have brought us to this particular place and time. And I'd especially like to thank the indigenous peoples of this North American continent who related so well and harmoniously with these ecosystems for literally thousands of years, whose descendants are still among us and are us. In my situation, I'd like to express gratitude to the Pawtucket peoples of the lower Merrimack River Valley and the Atlantic shore, from present-day York, Maine to Salem, Massachusetts. May our teaching continue along paths that our forebears would approve. May we honor the first people's wisdom and caring compassion and carry it on. And my gratitude goes out as well to those of you at Pro Social World who have so kindly listened and are listening and watching today or whenever. And I truly value your presence and this opportunity to share. And let's first consider what could be called now and next. Let's review our social context and a possible shared goal. And after that, we'll dive into some real life examples of how we can blend the arts, including gardening and artful games, into the teaching of serious science at the elementary level, and why this is beneficial and actually necessary. And first, let's speak openly to the historic setting of our teaching and the challenge of preparing young people for this difficult world, for a world convulsed by a sixth mass extinction event, perilous climate instability, massive injustice, including suffering and violence at many levels, all of which is being caused by the misplaced priorities of some of us humans. Our task as educators, acculturating new generations, and as practitioners of conscious adaptation is especially difficult at this time, but also especially necessary and even pivotal. We need to construct as expeditiously as possible, to the degree that there are still margins available for such action, the more just, beautiful, and ecologically sustainable ways of life that our hearts know are possible. And I'm borrowing here, of course, and revising slightly that memorable phrase from Charles Eisenstein. So what questions challenge us as primary school educators? Well, within this setting and with this goal as a teacher or parent, how can we raise our children so that they can withstand the blandishments, the pressures, the rational despair, which enables business as usual in the dominant, greedy, industrialized culture of the 21st century? How can we work with others to prepare our precious youngsters to participate fully in the reinvigoration of ecologically sustainable, organically regenerative, humanely scaled communities and societies? How can we prepare them to work, restore, and flourish on a healthy, peaceful, and gloriously biodiverse and culturally diverse planet? How can we pass along knowledge in a way that ensures that the learning does not become alienating and aversive, that the educational progression does not engender a diminished sense of self-worth and deep resentment and even shame among all but the fortunate few? How can we teachers help our young people so that they can grow physically, psychologically, socially, intellectually, and spiritually, so that they will be able to maintain access to the zest, camaraderie, compassion, knowledge, and vision that is required for the great turning? And here I'm referencing the concepts of Joanna Macy and David Corton. How can we help our children see and feel the joy and allure of the great work? And here I'm using Thomas Berry's phrase about this process we're all engaged in right now, trying to sort of steer our human cultures, our human endeavor back into alignment with in harmony with the rest of the planet and the capacities of our planet, so that we can continue on. And finally, how can we find methods and content that will fit the current educational context and yet stretch it a little bit and help us guide those students towards this transition that we see towards more ecologically attuned, socially just, well, actually biologically just sort of relationship between humans and this whole beautiful planet. If we believe in dual inheritance as parents, teachers, and citizens, one of our tasks is to live with and try to answer the questions I just put forward. And I've been struggling with them for 30 years. And after many wrong turns and dead ends, I'd like to share with you a few strategies that actually seem to facilitate some of the desired results. So I think the key takeaway is that we blend the teaching of science with the arts as much as possible, so that the dignity and capacities of each person who's learning, each student, can find occasions to blossom, even as they continue to develop sturdier connections with each other, society, the Earth community at large, and increased openness to learning. So I think here are just a few of the ecologically responsive teaching methods that I found. So my goal here is enjoyable arts-based learning, but I want to get in a lot of science. And so these are some of a few of many others methods that really seem to work. I think gardening is tremendous. It's so good for people. Arts-based learning games. That's what that book that I'm working on, or that is going to be published, that's what that's about. Games that allow children to play outdoors and yet learn science. They act, they sing. This is how people learn, I think. STEAM is wonderful, and especially if you can emphasize some field studies, observational drawing, and the literary arts if you're working with grade school children, because that's the way they learn. The young children find the more objective sort of lab-based types of science uncongenial, or less than congenial, I guess that's the word. So it's important to think about developmental stages. That's why I'm so glad to be as part of this group here, where we're talking about that, trying to figure out what types of teaching is appropriate at what stage in life. And project-based learning, I think, is tremendous. Learning by design, another good method. So these are just some of the practice that I've been helpful and I found helpful. And now I'd like to show you some more specific slides. Let's see here. I find that I just have to minimize something here a little bit. Okay. Here we've got a view of some of our students that they are actually, I think I skipped a slide here. We want to look at the cycles of the seasons. We had just nothing on this little patch of ground except grass with a ChemLawn contract and a few yew bushes against the side of the building. And here you can see how it's been transformed. And so we can watch the seasons, and the children are actually growing the gardens on this land. And this is the back of the school, which is even smaller piece of land. And they are interacting with nature throughout the year. And I think this is how we're going to help our children understand science, if they can actually participate in the whole natural world that science is attempting to describe to us. Gardens offer a place to explore, a niche for learning, not only sciences, but the culinary arts. There are so many kinds of art. A pivotal thing here is a definition of art. The definitions that guide my work include everyone can and should be an artist. And perhaps the most salient and succinct definition I can offer, and I share with all my students, is the following. And I'll just go back one more slide here. Okay, these are children exploring, but these are children actually doing some actual gardening. And I'll explain how this works as far as gardening as an art. Art is what we make when we use our heads, our hands, and our hearts to the very best of our ability to create works or experiences that have value to ourselves and to others. So these children are very proud of what they've done here. They've grown some plants, they're collecting the seeds. And when they do something like that and do it well with care and compassion, it's an art. And anything can be an art if it's done well. With this definition, you can immediately see that teaching, like gardening or painting or carpentry or fishing or cooking a meal or even washing the dishes, all that can and should be an art. Anything of positive value to others and to the creator of the work that is done well with heart can be an art. Aristotle used to say that art was the imitation of nature, but by that, most people say that he didn't mean it was just a reproduction of nature's outer forms. Instead, it was an extension of the creativity and dynamism of nature itself, which has resulted over the eons in the amplification and complexification of life into so many wonderfully beautiful and amazing forms, interactions, systems, patterns. And as teachers and parents, our challenge with enculturation is immense. As Picasso phrased it, every child is an artist. The problem is how to remain an artist once we grow up. And I think if we think about non-Western cultures, indigenous cultures especially, we can think of those cultures and realize that those people, they somehow came up with a way of growing up and still being artists, still creating beautiful societies that often were in ecological balance with their environment. So there's so much we can learn from indigenous people. And so that's one of the important things, I think, of 21st century, important realizations of 21st century science, that we need to incorporate the ecological knowledge of all these different cultures all over the world and make that part of our teaching to our youngsters, not just the culture of the industrialized West. Okay, so here's a Three Sisters Indigenous planting on the south side of our school. Here we see how this is in learning from other cultures is informing the education of our children at our school, and they really enjoyed doing the gardening and doing the harvesting and learning about botany and biology in general by being out in nature. They used art to celebrate the seeds that they made, and here you can see gardens can be a place to appreciate, celebrate, and give thanks. And it gave them a sense of belonging and agency within a generous world. And I think that's an attitude, a psychological attitude that we need to cultivate, because if we use the arts either in informal or formal education, it's very beneficial psychologically for our youngsters because it calls on people to empathize, interpret, evaluate, and express feelings in ways that connect the artist to the larger social sphere, as well as to their interior landscape. And this is how the arts support and deepen what would otherwise be merely factual learning. And it also connects our youngsters to socially valuable labor, to work that's meaningful over and above a quantified monetary sum. Making art that interprets and communicates new knowledge helps the youngsters embody and assimilate the concepts psychologically, emotionally, and within a community context. They share what they learn with their families. Art making blended with scientific content helps young people develop a wider sense of their own identity and an awareness of belonging that stretches beyond the individual. And this expanded identity conferred by art making offers a hint of immortality. It offers a bridge that can link the child with larger entities, long-lasting truths, and the workings of the cosmos at large. Creating art is typically an enjoyable and worthwhile endeavor for the artist of whatever age on a personal level, at least when the artwork is complete, and often during the process because of flow. And so blending with the science learning, our formal educational systems with the arts helps ensure that this kind of ecological and natural history learning and historical learning, that our educational systems do not become soul-killing and boring and annoying experiences for our youth. The school gardens are just are being outside in nature. That's part of our heritage as humanity. So I think the being outdoors is the world is really the appropriate setting for good education. It's a principle observed and enacted in many indigenous cultures or places such as ancient Greece or in India. And I believe that we must help our children realize their marvelous connections to nature, to its creativity, to all living beings, and human or otherwise, if we're going to prepare them for a good future. And so these are slides from our garden here in, can you imagine this is right in the middle of a little city? Can you see the brick walls back there? This is our garden. And I really truly believe that the idea of kindergarten, like the child's garden, was a great idea, but that it should be, we should all realize that gardens should not be for the very youngest. Rather than warehousing our youngsters in large institutional schools or man-made spaces, we need to get them back outside into the world of nature. And I think the rise of nature centers, forest schools, nature preschools, homeschooling, this is all a 21st century phenomenon that or farm learning. All this speaks to the fact that in the 21st century, we need to be returning to ways of education that are more natural to our evolutionary ways of learning, and that are more congenial and convivial with the rest of the living world. So when we take the kids out to make fairy houses, for example, we nourish their imagination, connect them with the heritage of the past. And then when they go outside, well, they're learning science and they're building fairy houses. They're doing both. They're finding wonderful little insects. They're looking at them in ways that they never would have looked at if I've just told them to go out and try to find how many arachnids can you find today? No, they're not going to discover spiders and little creatures like that with as much enjoyment as they do when they're actually building a fairy house. And this is for young kids, of course, and you can see the pride they take in what they're doing. They're learning about physics here, how to build and balance, and they're actually getting into the materials. Whenever possible, if we learn about the science of, say, dragonflies or hummingbirds, I have the kids make some kind of a toy to go along with what they're learning so that they can actually act out the interactions that they've learned about in their textbook or in our on our laptops. So here we're learning about the coevolution of blossoms and flowers, and they have their hummingbirds out in the garden. And this is an activity that's right on my website. And here's a toss game that's an adaptation of a wonderful Native American game for learning about pollinators and different types of flower shapes that are adapted to accommodate different types of butterflies or bees or whatever, visiting insect or bird or whatever. Children like playing that. They play it with their friends. This shows the type using the arts to reinforce visually all the verbal information that's been acquired about the symbiosis of that exists between flowering plants and pollinators. Okay, this is for the youngest children. For the youngest children, they like to act things out with songs and a little rhyme, a little poem. This is an insect activity. I think I'll spare you singing the song, but it asks the children. They actually, well, I can just do it really quickly, I guess. What it does is it's a way for the child to actually pretend to be the creature that they're learning about. So this little insect, I don't think I'm too nervous, I think, to sing, so I'm not going to try to sing it. But the kids would act this out, and they go through the whole life cycle of a butterfly or moth, and it's the sort of learning that allows them to advance very well with their understanding of science vocabulary, with a whole metabolist sort of life cycle, all this complicated learning, but it's done with fun. And at the end, they get to fly off around the class, and they can just play and find their friends for a few minutes. And it's a reward for having participated well in this little social activity. Here we have the children out investigating their garden and what went wrong at this particular point. But actually the squash bugs who visited turned out to be quite interesting to the children. Here's another day when we went out and we were looking at crickets. And then the children go back into the classroom and they actually draw the animals that they've been studying. And we have music in the background that is actually provided by the animals themselves. We have recordings from Lang Elliott of the sounds of different types of insects and the different types of singing insects that they were drawing are playing in the background as the kids draw. And you can see this youngster is not tracing. He's actually just observing some carefully drawn illustrations of grasshoppers and katydids and crickets, and he's just drawing from those samples in a way that shows great respect and attention to the complexities of the structure of this animal. And this is a great way to learn science, and it's been known for a long time that one of the best ways to learn about nature is to actually observe and draw. So you use not just the eyes, but your hands to capture an image and study the beautiful forms of these creatures. And here's another little set of games or toys that the children created as they're learning about grasshoppers. And then these become pets that they take home and they share with their family, and they talk about what they made, and it's a wonderful experience. And here we have more analytical types of observational drawing. This is harder for the kids to do outside than you might imagine, and you want to enlist your art teacher in helping them learn different types of methods. Contour is a great method to learn, but I won't go into that in great depth, but I will say it is wonderful for them to discuss what they're doing with their peers. Project Zero at Harvard had some really great studies on how children, if they can just talk with one another about what they're drawing and help one another, can really amplify their success with realistic drawings, if that's what they're trying to do. And here you see some samples of field drawings. They're combining science with their proficiency in language. And these are some of the methods, let's see, that are really good for students to learn if you're going to have them take their science learning and turn it into visual products. They can learn a contour, mass, analytical method. Those are all really, really helpful. And here you can see this is another little song that children sing and act out, because acting is so important. And they also grow their sunflowers back here. They planted those. They plant them in the spring, harvest them in the summer, in the fall, or just enjoy watching the goldfinches in those stands of sunflowers, and they paint them. And it's all an integration of the arts and sciences. And this is nothing new. This is the sort of thing that the Waldorf schools, the Rudolf Steiner philosophy encourage. But we really, I think we need to move forward with it quickly now in the 21st century. It's time to make our educational system consonant with the needs of our children and the needs of the planet. These are some beautiful drawings 5th and 6th graders did, and you'll notice how well they learned their science vocabulary, but just the beautiful way they've arranged these observations on their pages here. And then they can share that with their family. And drawing is such a wonderful thing for children. Once they go from collecting objects, they learn to harvest things as images. And this is a big psychological step forward, where they can go out and just make a drawing rather than having to pick the flower. And of course, photography is another way that they can document what they learn, what they discover. And so this is collage, where group projects, the art projects, individual art projects are then assembled into larger projects that are shared in the halls for the other students to learn from. And so our halls become a little science museums for the kids to not only demonstrate what they can do artistically, but also pass on to the kids who want to know some of the things that they've learned in science class, in their environmental science class. And just a few samples of these. How's everybody doing? Are you all, is everyone still awake?
Yeah, no, this is great. Thank you.
Please, if anyone has any questions or wants to amplify or, expand on something that I've mentioned, just go ahead and say. They're only just the 5 of us, so please. So the message here has been: teach the science, but envelop it with art, make things beautiful, alternate reflection and quiet attention to nature with sociability and fun. So now we're going to transition to the way kids learn, which is very actively. And sometimes the children just need to run, and we need to allow them to do that. But then we transform it. We turn their running into a little story, and the first one who's going to win on this little race is going to be the first apple to ripen, or the first sprout to appear in the garden. So the teacher's role is to add a little bit of culture, or a little bit of context to what kids are going to be doing anyway, which is running. And here we see some folks getting ready to run. I do, before I go into the games, I'll just leave this slide up, which is kind of an interesting one. I do want to mention what kinds of teaching I'm trying to get across with the science. I want to weave into the gardening and the environmental science curriculum as much as possible, as much significant science content, natural history learning as possible. And besides all the basics that include weather, physics, awareness of the sun, the moon, and patterns, which you noticed probably on some of those, you notice some of the topics we're covering here. All right, besides all of this, we also want to make sure that the children get some of the new understandings of evolution and complexity that are set forth in theories such as multi-level selection, endosymbiosis, and evolutionary transitions. These are really hard concepts, but if the children are gardening and actually learning how the plants are interacting with all the different creatures around them and the weather systems and all that, then they actually start to build up foundational awareness of these really complex scientific processes. And so we hope that the children will begin to learn about the functions of previously obscure creatures, such as the microbiota of the soil, and they learn about communication between plants, maybe even warning chemicals, volatile warning chemicals, such as the methyl salicylate of the wintergreen that we have up here in the black birch and some other species in the Northeast woodlands. We share with them recent discoveries of the extensive and old mineral, water, and nutrient transport systems that exist between fungi and perennial plants, particularly trees, but also plants like orchids, which have been given the humorous title of the wood wide web. I can hardly say that. And we now know that these interactions are so important for the sustainability of the forest as we know them. And I'm talking about Susan Simard's paradigm shifting research about the ways that trees aid through the aid of mycorrhizal fungi are able to take care of their offspring and even other trees who are struggling. And this is the kind of exciting new science that we need to communicate, I think, in our teaching. And gardening education will help us to move this kind of information forward. And I also hope that when we're gardening, that we're nurturing our children's sense of wonder, supporting their innate quest to understand and be helpful, loving, and beloved members of the amazing Earth community, a community of interdependent and mutually supporting life forms, large and small. The arts help us to do this kind of nurturing. And on a more practical level, we're also equipping them with gardening, cooking, and even farming skills with gardening. With this kind of teaching and attitudes and values, a valorization of hard work, which allows them to grow and prepare and preserve plenty of food. And in the not too future, in our precarious times, home gardens may become essential, even here in places like New Hampshire and Massachusetts. And they'll be essential as well as decorative. And that prospect shouldn't be something that is overwhelmingly gloomy, nor does it necessarily imply that our lives will be bereft of joy or conviviality, but it is a reality that we should be teaching towards as we help our children prepare for adulthood. So games in the arts are a wonderful set of tools. And now let's look at some of the games, because kids will be playing games no matter what. Here we were doing an Andy Goldsworthy-based project in which they were doing some installation art, and it was just going beautifully. And as it happened, a spark of a ray of light went through the trees, and these little boys just started dancing around their artwork. I don't know if you can see it. I'll try to, I can't really enlarge it too well, but they just spontaneously burst into this lovely little circle dance. And so I use lots of circle dances, circle games, teaching science. The seasons are a circle, cycles are part of nature. So here's a lot of work that we do with the very young children does involve little circle games. They're a way children have played for years. The Hawk in the Nest is one of my favorites. Folks, I will now go into the games, but I do hear something. Am I doing something wrong? Does anybody else hear extra sounds?
I could hear it too, Edith. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we should all mute. I don't know what it is. And I'm muted because it's a lot of noise here, but
it might be me. I don't know.
Try speaking now.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. I think that someone knew. Hi, Paul. I'm sorry. I just muted you, but I think that there's just some feedback when you joined, but you should be all set now, Edith.
Oh, okay, great. Okay. So a circle game, you could have acting going on in it. It also involves the children. The simplest kind, they just hold their hands to form a ring, but for the very young children, they can't even do that. They just move in a circle, and that's all you can expect from them. And this dance formulation helps the little ones coordinate their movements in a friendly, inclusive manner as they begin to walk in unison. Then they have the fun of realizing they've created their own rotating circle. Physically, visually, psychologically, it establishes the unity of the group, and they can be very effective for social learning and for creating an energizing and supportive atmosphere. The children discover they can help or hinder each other with their motions. And that gives everybody a sense of their importance, which is really important, we want our children to have a sense of self-worth. And a circle game shows that everybody is important. If each child holds on and does their best, the circle will spin in a delightful way. And these are a gentle, kindly way to begin building executive function skills that children are not going to learn if they're sitting in their desk learning from a worksheet. They learn these by being up and moving around. And it helps the children bond positively with their peers and also with the educational project that their family, teacher, society care about so deeply. They trust and respect their families more when the school is positive, friendly, and empowering. And I think that's an important thing that we need to remember as we design 21st century educational experiences. And so this is one of my favorite projects, The Hawk and the Nest. It's for older children, so they have to know how to be in a circle, but it's based on Farmer in the Dell, an old traditional American and English song, and it is a way for children to learn about food chains, the trophic web, and it gives them a chance to act and show off in front of their friends and choose people, so they build their social alliances. It's just a wonderful game that I elaborate in my book, and that one was published in Green Teacher magazine too, and it's been one of my most popular games. So we have circle games about wasps and black flies, some important creatures in our northeastern woodlands. And here's a follow-up activity, some sculpture that children made with natural materials to illustrate the wasps. That's another game that's in the book that's coming out in fall. Progress to a Goal. These games are wonderful for passing along really complicated information about particular species, and they're a way for organizing the children so that they will listen to the actual events that take place in the creatures' lives. I think I need to invite you to read about what a Progress to a Goal game is. If you're interested, or ask me about it, I can explain it later, but I don't want to take up too much time on it. But it's basically a set of cards, and they're like fortune cards, and two teams are against each other. They move forward or backwards based on what the cards say. Tag can be adapted to all kinds of science content. There's so much in nature is involved, hunting and chasing. So this is a game that is very easily incorporated into environmental science learning. Jack Frost and the Crickets is this is an adaptation for gardening. This is a small garden club group that we have, and they used to like to play that, but this works well for a full classroom too. The bird migration games are wonderful ways to familiarize children with all the dangers and vicissitudes of migration, and they can actually act out and empathize with the creatures by playing a game of this sort. And here, these are pretty self-explanatory slides right here. Sorting, you can have kids in teams. Relays are wonderful because, again, there's a social learning of working in a group that everybody has value. Some children are really fast runners. Others learn the content that they're sorting faster than others. And in a relay race setting, the children are teaching each other, and they're also getting the exercise they need as they sort cards or creatures according to certain whatever categories. It could be as simple as true and false. And that's just having time outside with friends. Playing these games is important. Conversations. Team collecting is a great activity. This is what these children have to do to be for their team or for them individually to be the winners. They have to collect a certain set of cards, and those are shown here, some true and false ones, but this can be adapted for plants to grow. This is how they learn about photosynthesis. The youngest children just learn about it in a simple way. But notice I do not have the plants using air for photosynthesis. Children should be learning at the earliest age that plants are taking in CO2 and releasing oxygen. And they can learn that. They have such a capacity for learning vocabulary when they're young. It's really terrible that our schools, prior to 5th grade, they're teaching children that plants need air for photosynthesis. That's just not true. They need carbon dioxide. And in a time of global warming caused by carbon dioxide and methane and nitrous oxide and all these different things, our children need to be getting a chemical vocabulary that helps them understand the chemistry of the atmosphere at an early age, and they can do it. And it's not that hard. And this is one of my another favorite game. This is about parental care and the components of parental care. To win the game, you have to collect all of the components. They're on these particular cards. And this is a game that has a lot of actings involved in this. And acting, of course, is calling on the children to imagine putting themselves in the place of the other creatures who share this world with us. So it's really wonderful for building up their sense of community with the other species that make up this planet. And so you can just see them out here collecting here, and they can work in families or teams. They come up with their own very complicated scenarios very quickly. And so we also need time for individual reflection and introspection. That's very important, as well as the games, as well as the art making. And I want to just thank you all for listening. Thank you for the vital work that you're going to do.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Edith.
Oh, thank you. I'm
Yeah.
sorry it was too long.
It's
No.
such a rich offering that you have, and for sure I will love to have the book in my hands, and lots of questions, I'm sure. Please, anyone, if you have question for Edith.
Well, anyone who'd like to, I feel like I didn't give the games their due. I went way too fast, and I can't explain. I'm better at reading something I've written rather than speaking extemporaneously. But all of that with actual explanations for any of those games that might have caught your fancy are on the PDF, which can be downloaded for free on the website. And there are extensive explanations there. Let's see. I see some questions in the website.
Yeah, I made a few comments just because I work with neurodivergent children, and I just love the I also work in schools, and it breaks my heart that is I primarily work in special education classrooms, but I do push into schools. But how much of their work is just worksheets and sitting at the table, and the focus is all on compliant and sitting still and following along on something that's really boring. So I just thought that all of your activities that you were saying, they're so interactive, and I see so much potential. And I think it's just, just for children who don't think the same way as neurotypical children, or who have different needs, and especially different sensory needs. How would this support their potential in such a different way than what our current system is? I think it's just fascinating.
And I think that speaks to that whole idea of weird society we are. To get children to act the way they're supposed to in the school is a really difficult thing that requires so much parental care all along the early years so that they are patient and everything has gone so well that they're willing to sit and trust an adult to sit through that 6-hour or 7-hour day at their desk, right? But I think children, the neurotypical children, are the ones who are running around, the ones who are active. And we're just doing them such a terrible disservice to put them into a formal setting, an industrialized, mechanized sort of setting where they aren't allowed to express themselves, and where their value comes from listening to what somebody else tells them to do and doing it rather than doing what comes naturally to them, which is playing. which is getting back to Peter Gray, which is what we were talking about, some of us earlier. Peter Gray and other proponents of a more active sort of responsible childhood for our youngsters rather than putting them into a really formal setting. Not that there isn't wonderful information that can be gleaned from the formal setting, and it's good for some, but it's not good for everybody.
Caesar, please.
Yes, sorry again for not having my camera on. It's not working. I'm curious about the role of the other adults in the school. So it's so important that we value art and beauty. And you mentioned that the hope is that the kids, when they grow up, they value these things. But if other educators in the schools are not appreciating or celebrating or participating, I think it's not culturally valued. And how do you see the other adults and the participation of them in this kind of activities?
Well, as I was usually the art teacher. I was in schools where they valued an art teacher, and they would keep that art teacher there. And I would teach those children sometimes from kindergarten all the way to 6th. So you have to be in a community that has some support, unfortunately, or at least that was my experience. But I think things are changing because there are more outdoor classrooms. There's more understanding of gardening education. So I think with gardening education, art education, and PE, I would work with some of those. I mean, I would work with a PE teacher, and I would work with other teachers. So the specialists, we all tended to work together. We were kind of like an endangered species, the music teacher and myself. So, but also I have to say, quite frankly, I was in a Catholic school. We have a history of valorizing the arts and the dignity of human labor. And we were a little different than a public school system that had to report to the superintendent. So this is an incredibly important point. But the reason I wrote the book and put my book with the games, just to make them available to people and make them available for free, is because if you are an environmental science teacher, you can take the kids outside and you can teach them really good science that no administrator can give you a hard time about. And you can teach them the art. And why not have our environmental science teachers have more time for themselves to learn art too, because it's a great way to learn science too. And so if we can have more of either our art teachers learning more science or our science teachers learning more art at the elementary level, then they can actually get that across, even in a very rigid sort of, not very visionary school administrative system. And parents love it, and the kids love it, because if the kids are happy, the parents are happy. And if they're learning real science, then everybody's happy. So it seems to me. Well, I'm just generalizing.
Yeah, you mentioned the Project Zero from Harvard, and
so great.
You may know it started in the 60s with Howard Gardner and David Perkins. They were just graduate students, and they started the project because they intended to use art to open the mind and heart for math and science. And so they did a marvelous job along this, 50 years. And when I ask is, for instance, a math teacher doesn't pay attention to beauty, or even science teachers. And I think this is so important that they believe they are also huge to value and to show that they appreciate this.
I was lucky to teach with some math teachers who loved the beauty of math. And they would, and I would go and marvel at the projects they were doing with the kids on geometry and the Fibonacci sequence and all these things. And they would come and they would talk with me about what I was doing. So there are some, I think it's coming to Cesar. And as you say, that Project Zero was wonderful. And I'm so grateful to them because they gave me a lot of ideas for how I taught. when I first encountered them, and they put resources up for free online that I could access in the early 2000s, and so useful.
Thank you. I do have a question for you, Edith. I just want to acknowledge that we are at 1 hour. Please stay if you can. And Vivek, if you would like to ask any question, I will go after you.
No, I don't have any questions. It was a very rich presentation. I enjoyed it a lot.
Oh,
Great,
thank you
thanks.
so much.
Yeah.
With gratitude.
Edith, I'm impressed and amazed of how much you touch on the complexity of how children learn. And you're right, to have the patience to draw, and don't press them, oh, you have 10 minutes to complete this project. You know, like in standardized schools, they are always against the time. You have 15 minutes to do this. So I think also allowing them to have freedom outside in the garden, or even when they take the time after to draw, is important. And I do feel that the schedule of 1 hour we are doing math, 1 hour it's recess, so it's so much disruption on the continuity of their time. But also I was really appreciative of your games, that when you involve team building and community building, because I found children are not taught in school, if they don't have from parents support, they don't know how to cooperate well in class. So they always are, oh, I finish, I'm doing something else, I don't want to participate. Even reading together, they are not used to pay attention to other people in the normal setting. So I think it's really important to play and to learn how to cooperate. And you have so many games that I would love to learn more. And I will go online.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
I think we do our children tremendous disservice not giving them recess. The Finnish school model of 15 minutes of recess for every 45 minutes of intellectual desk work is a great one. And I have a resource on that I used I did a webinar just on school games, on gardening about a month ago. And I have a resource that's featured on my website right now, just about the Finnish system and getting those kids out to play. And then when they play in peer, there used to be children's games that were really good for building teams, and the children taught themselves. And that was that's a part of our Western culture that has been diminished and lost by not having recess and not having chances to do that. So luckily the physical ed teachers, sometimes they will do that, but there's also, it can also just come from the children themselves and from parents who are reviving those traditional games. And I'm lucky to have my little grandbaby goes to Waldorf schools. They keep some of those traditional games going too. So yeah, it's a complicated subject.
Agree. So yes. So I think we are all here to kind of maybe acknowledge that even adults have to learn. And like you mentioned, it's good to learn at any age. And I would rather try to go back to the drawing board and learn myself how to draw by observation, because you're right, I used to love drawing as a child, but growing up I lost that that passion. So, and
never too old.
exactly and what Caesar mentioned, the teacher could be supportive or cannot be supportive. So it's good for the adults to learn and be open-minded and be admirer of beauty of nature. Yes. So maybe if there are no further questions, we will soon come to a close. I just want to know if you have any thoughts of how to continue to meet next 2 weeks for now, and if emails is good for everybody, or we discuss, take 5 minutes to discuss next. And Caesar, I don't want to impose anybody. I'm thinking if you would like to make a presentation, even if not in so soon, but in the next meetings that we will have.
That'd be great.
Yes, I'd love to present. In 2 weeks, I have another huge presentation. Maybe if we can do the next
After.
one.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
after.
that's for sure.
But
No
I'd
pressure,
love.
no pressure. Yes,
Yeah,
it's an open
yeah,
invitation. Thank you for considering that.
yeah.
Amazing,
Thanks.
amazing.
Thanks.
And Vivek, I hope we'll see you again. We meet every second week, and please keep in touch, and then maybe we will be a presenter in the future too. All of us would like to
Yeah.
take turns.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I think for the sake of time, we don't have to take decision now. So maybe we'll keep in touch by emails, but we'll meet next week. And maybe if we don't have a presenter, we could attend to more administrative exercise that we have to do, maybe the ACT metrics, and discuss about the CDPs, the design principles from pro-social, and there is also another exercise that Anna just added to our Google document. It's how we envision the future, how we're seeing ourselves in 5 years from now, but it's just for us to use our imagination and how we see the future as being in this group, for sure. So we'll keep in touch then. Yes, and thank you very much, Edith, for such a beautiful presentation.
Oh, thank you so much for giving me a chance to do this and being so kind and supporting me on this journey. Thank you.
You're more than welcome. Thank you, everyone.
Right.
So
Thank you,
hope to see
everyone.
you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Edith.
Congratulations.
Oh, well, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Anna, I think you're busy, so I will not take your time. We'll keep in touch by email, maybe.